The show starts with Arisu lying in his bed. Whenever the world felt too loud and too lonely, he would lie there with his phone, listening to a small-time radio host named Apollo. Her voice was calm, warm, and strangely comforting. At the time, her radio show had so few listeners that it felt like it was just the two of them talking. Every night, without fail, Apollo ended her radio show the same way. She would softly tell her listeners that she loved them. It was such a simple phrase, yet for Arisu, it carved itself deeply into his heart. That voice became his refuge, the one thing that made him feel understood. But one day, she suddenly disappeared. A few years later, as spring arrives, a new school year begins at Furian Academy. Or rather, what used to be Furian Girls Academy. The classroom buzzes with confusion as a nervous teacher stands at the front, clearly struggling with an important announcement. His voice wavers as he explains that Furian Girls Academy and Furian Boys have officially merged. The school is now fully co-ed. Before he can properly finish, Arisu suddenly stands up. Clearly dissatisfied with his fumbling explanation, he interrupts without hesitation. With an air of confidence that borders on arrogance, he introduces himself to the class. He states plainly that he plans to leave Japan one day, and because of that, he cannot tolerate imperfection. He bows politely, as if that formality balances out his blunt behavior. Then, just when the room thinks he's done, he drops another shocking statement. He declares that he is only 99% perfect. To reach 100%, he calmly explains that he needs all the girls in the class to tell him that they love him. The room falls into stunned silence before erupting into outrage. During the break, the boys immediately surround Arisu, furious. They accuse him of ruining their reputation and making the girls wary of all of them. Voices overlap as they demand to know what he was thinking. Arisu, however, remains completely unfazed. He insists that there's nothing wrong with what he did and even suggests they should be grateful. Meanwhile, a blonde girl approaches him with clear interest. Assuming that Arisu must come from a wealthy family, she flirts openly, smiling confidently. Arisu steps closer without warning, invading her personal space so suddenly that she instinctively backs away. He listens carefully as she speaks, then bluntly comments that her voice lacks impact. No charm, no resonance, just flat criticism. Noticing the time, Arisu suddenly announces that he needs to use the bathroom. He explains, with complete seriousness, that he relieves himself at the exact same time every day. Without another word, he walks away. Behind him, the girls whisper among themselves, calling him strange and unsettling. The boys try to explain that, since middle school, Arisu has been searching for a girl he recognizes only by her voice. Out in the hallway, Arisu hears everything. As he walks, he listens intently to the voices around him, filtering through laughter and chatter. He searches desperately for that familiar sound, but none of them match. None of them feel right. Then his phone vibrates. In the past, notifications like this would have filled him with excitement. They usually meant Apollo's radio host had begun. Then, suddenly, a soft voice whispers behind him, "I love you." Arisu freezes in place. It's Rika, standing close, teasing him as she reminds him that break time is almost over. She also casually points out that he still hasn't gone to the toilet. Completely flustered, Arisu panics and rushes off down the hallway. Later, during lunch, Arisu can barely concentrate. He pokes at his food, replaying Rika's voice over and over again in his head. Something about it lingers in his thoughts, refusing to fade. But soon, another interruption cuts through his daze. A female voice echoes through the school intercom system. Instantly, the boys around him light up, thrilled that a girl is handling announcements. Arisu, however, feels a sharp jolt of emotion, anticipation mixed with fear. Without warning, he stands up and announces that he has something important to do. He runs through the hallways, heart pounding. Based on years of listening to Apollo, he knows certain things. She should be around his age. She lives in the same prefecture. She once spoke about attending a school with an ocean view, an Albert-style high school. That memory is the reason Arisu enrolled here in the first place. He knew the schools would merge by the time they reached high school. Finally, he reaches the broadcast room and throws the door open. Inside, 4 girls stare at him in confusion. They immediately scold him for interrupting their broadcast. Rika quickly tells Nini to mute the microphone. As they lecture him, Arisu focuses on their voices. One sounds like Apollo's tone. Another has her pronunciation. One reminds him of Apollo's soft whispering late at night. Another carries the same irritated edge she sometimes had. And that realization hits him hard. He had been so sure he could recognize Apollo instantly, that her voice alone would be unmistakable. Yet now, standing right in front of her, he can't tell who she is. The girls ask if he plans to go pro someday. They explain that they joined the broadcasting club to pursue careers involving voice work. Shinobu wants to become a news anchor, and Rika dreams of becoming a singer. Their ambitions stir memories of Apollo talking about wanting to use her voice professionally. Then the mood shifts. Nini casually mentions she already knows about him because of his outrageous self-introduction. Arisu defends himself, explaining that he's searching for someone important. Aiko jokingly asks if that person might be her, showing him her VTuber model and admitting that her shyness is part of her persona. Rika jumps in, teasing Arisu and suggesting he came all this way just to see her. Calmly, Arisu admits that he did, then directly asks whether any of them is Apollo. The girls stare at him blankly. Some even joke that he might be talking about chocolate. Arisu doesn't believe them. He's convinced Apollo is hiding. Her disappearance from the radio host must be intentional. Deciding not to push further, Arisu turns to leave. But the girls warn him not to come back unless he joins the club. Only members are allowed inside. Arisu turns around and declares that he's a professional when it comes to voice work. He points out their biggest weakness, the outdated equipment. Iko agrees but says there's nothing they can do. That's when Arisu makes an offer. He'll provide brand new equipment if they let him join. Silence fills the room. Finally, one girl admits it sounds like a good deal. Rika casually adds that Arisu has a pleasant voice. The compliment catches him completely off guard. Arisu confidently announces that he'll lead the club to greatness as president, only to be immediately shut down when Nini reminds him they already have one. When the girls ask how they can repay him, Rika smiles and tells him to face away. Suddenly, they surround him, their voices overlapping as they all say they love him. Overwhelmed and embarrassed beyond belief, Arisu panics and runs out, claiming he needs to finish lunch. Outside, he's certain now. Apollo is one of them. His thoughts return to her final radio host. He had been the only listener left when she ended it. She told everyone she loved them. Summoning his courage, Arisu confesses that he loved her too. Looking back on it now, the memory makes him cringe, and he can't help but scold himself for blurting out a confession to a girl he hardly even knew. Part of his urgency to find Apollo is selfish. He needs that confession deleted. He plans to become someone influential in the future, and he can't risk something so embarrassing surfacing later. By the end of the day, the club celebrates his acceptance. They force him into ridiculous party clothes, teasing him relentlessly. When Nini calls him their errand boy, he nearly snaps. But he swallows his pride and agrees to play along. The next day, Arisu reviews his notes and realizes that guessing won't get him anywhere, so he decides to carefully observe each of the girls instead. When he enters the broadcasting club room, only Shinobu is there, adjusting her script for the after-school broadcast, and she explains that she marks difficult words because she often messes up her lines before signaling him to stay quiet as the broadcast begins. Arisu watches closely, remembering that Shinobu dreams of becoming a news anchor and is also the student council vice president as well as a model honor student, and her voice sounds clear and professional over the speakers, but the moment she reaches the words she marked, she mispronounces them every time, making the mistake impossible to ignore, and without thinking, Arisu blurts out a correction while the microphone is still on. Back in class, his male classmates warn him never to correct Shinobu again, insisting her mistakes are part of her charm, so Arisu gives up arguing, walks away, and mentally lowers her on his list of possible Apollo candidates. Soon after, he overhears Nini excitedly talking about the comic Lillos, which Apollo once mentioned, and when a classmate asks Nini to read a character's lines aloud, her performance is surprisingly accurate at first, impressing Arisu, but she soon stumbles over several words and changes the story, leaving him disappointed. When Nini notices him watching and loudly calls him out for ogling her, Arisu tries to explain himself, but sensing the hostility around her, he quietly leaves and later sits alone on a set of steps, reflecting on how difficult it has been to identify Apollo and wondering if hearing her only through radio host has distorted his perception, realizing that voice alone isn't enough and that he needs to match Apollo's personality and passion as well. His thoughts are interrupted when Iko suddenly speaks beside him, startling him and quickly apologizing while explaining that she can't see well with her colored contacts, and she mentions that she uses this spot to do short break time streams as an aspiring VTuber. Iko sets up her tablet, greets her viewers energetically, reads a few comments, and ends the stream almost immediately. And although she explains that break streams are meant to be brief, Arisu still feels let down and wanders the school as his frustration grows, thinking the club members are far too relaxed about their dreams. His thoughts return to Apollo and the promise they made to work toward the professional world together, and he begins to wonder if he was the only one who truly remembers the promise. Soon, Shinobu's voice echoes through the school for announcements. while elsewhere Aiko scolds Rika for slacking off, prompting Rika to casually wonder what Arisu really thinks of them, only for Arisu's voice to suddenly come over the intercom. Alarmed, the girls rush to the broadcast room and find Arisu calling out the broadcasting club for being lax, saying they shouldn't be treated like princesses and declaring that if Apollo is among them, she needs to remember their promise, and since he doesn't know who she is, he vows to make all of their dreams come true and push the club toward becoming true professionals, only to be kicked out immediately so the girls can retake the broadcast. Standing outside, Arisu receives a notification that Apollo is live, and as he listens, she warmly thanks him for always supporting her, apologizes for still hiding her identity, and finally confesses that every time she said she loved her listeners, she was always talking about him, leaving Arisu in silent shock as he stares at the broadcast room door. That marks the end of today's Recap. If you enjoyed the video and want more of it, please support the channel by leaving a like and subscribe. Let's help us reach a current goal of 10K subscribers.